Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Alex and I'm the Training Coordinator for Social Marketing at Griffith. I'm filling in today for Morgan Cole, who usually looks after these sessions. And for a bit of housekeeping, let's start off. So please mute your microphones to reduce any background noise. Please also turn off your webcams to ensure we maintain the best possible streaming quality. If you have any questions throughout, please enter them in the chat box, and these will be answered in the Q&A session toward the end. There will be several polls today, which we would love you to participate in. And you may have noticed as well that this has been recorded. You'll be receiving an email afterwards with this recording and some other goodies. Without taking any more of your time, I shall now hand you over to our facilitators, Sharon and Karina. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Alex. And hi, everyone. I'm Karina, and I'm here with Sharon today to share our science-based tips on how we can improve and optimize your communication. As Alex was mentioning, we are going to use a chat box, and we have a few polls, so we're hoping to get an interactive session to keep you on your toes as well. So we'll dive straight into it. And what does the marketing landscape look like? So both Sharon and I went for a 15-minute walk. And in those 15 minutes, we counted as many communication messages as we could possibly see. So what you're seeing now is what my neighborhood looks like. And it is overwhelming. It is everything from for sale signs to construction sites, signs, and to encourage gambling. So it is absolutely crucial that we stand out with our messaging, and that because this is what we're competing against. So I know Sharon went out for a walk as well in her neighborhood, and she's going to share what she saw.
Hi everyone, it's great to have you here today, and really happy to be working with you. So I happen to live on a fairly busy road, having a beautiful home to live in that's a very original home. So the whole suburb grew around this particular house. And what do I see when I go for a walk? Many things. And if you think about it, this is just 15 minutes of trying to capture the many different things that we're exposed to and we're surrounded by as we actually get out there to live our daily lives. So it's important when you're actually designing communications to understand just how cluttered our environment actually is. If I challenged you to go outside and capture everything that was surrounding you, would you have thought to capture things like the messaging on the back of someone's shoes, the discarded wrapper that's lying on the ground, the signage from very functional utilitarian signs like here's the park and here's what you can and can't do in the park and wireless, etc., to the buses and cars that are driving past you or are parked on the road? Because sometimes if I challenge you to think about messaging and capturing all of this, the first thing you would have done was swept in all of the social media, advertisements, and other things that we're exposed to ordinarily. But what is actually happening in practice is that marketers have branded everything from the products we consume to the clothes that we wear, the ideas, and certainly here in Queensland at the moment, we're actually experiencing an election campaign. So even our political parties have branded themselves, some of their players, and they're actually out there furiously marketing to us beautiful programs that have been branded and endorsed. So once upon a time, in a world where there was no social media, we were told that we were exposed to a few hundred or thousands of messages a day. Those numbers today have exploded and exponentially. And certainly I've noticed if you're working through any form of social media now, there are more and more ads creeping into our social media feeds than at any other time before in history. So communications surround us. We have people shouting for our attention all the time. So how do you stand out from the clutter, and what do you actually do? So communicating effectively really does require making sure that the message that you send actually reaches the people you're trying to reach, just as you intended it to actually do so. So what stood out for me in my 15-minute walk were clear, bright, and not cluttered things. So if you think about it, I'm walking fast, looking around everywhere I go. So the Pod Early School, clean, uncluttered, clear. Coles Express, loud colours, and again, really clear. Stands for everything I need. I can pop in there and get just what I need at a moment's notice. So really important for us to think through what it is that we're trying to do when we communicate. Now today I work in social and behavioural change. And what that means is I'm actually trying to shout and attract attention on even lower budgets than when I was operating commercially. One of my favourite long-standing, long-time marketers is Coca-Cola. Why does this stand out for me as a good example? Because it's consistent and it's delivered the same concept for decades and centuries, like a long, long time. And in fact, did you know that Christmas is actually red and Santa Claus is red all because of Coca-Cola? Developing clear associations around times of the year that some of us love the most to actually create that positive association, that warm, fuzzy feeling that we all love. So Coke doesn't talk about profit, does it? It doesn't remind you that it's making a killing every time you buy the product. What it actually does is creates associations in your mind and delivers consistently over time. Take a look here at how I've pulled messages from across the planet and how these messages look exactly the same. Even when the language changes, the look and feel doesn't. So Coca-Cola is very clear and very consistent. So what surprised me when I first started working in the social change space was how often messages changed, how quick people were to throw away one program and start another and lose every asset that they'd ever built. I found that crazy because you look at Coke and its marketing for more than a century now, and it's been consistent for decades. So we have to be very careful about what we actually do, and then we have to refine once we get it right and stick to it like glue. Now in social marketing at Griffith, we run our process in a really simplistic way. Across 3 stages, we work with people, design our things for them, and then test to see how well they actually hit the market. So we will step you through this process today because we've found CBE as one of the best ways so far to try and communicate who we are, how we approach, and what we actually do. In a lot of change in the space that I work in, many practitioners actually set programs for people. They don't engage with them. They don't check. They don't work with them to understand what would work for a person and other people like them. So co-creation has us using participatory design methods to actually work with the people we're trying to reach, design the things in the language that means the most to them, and ensure our appeals are delivering what they actually need. Once we're armed with insights from co-creation, we move forward. We build our communications, our programs, the things we're trying to do in a way that works for those people and also the supporting stakeholders. Because there's no point in just meeting the needs of the people you're trying to reach if the stakeholders themselves don't support the idea, because they will block it. So we need partnerships, and we actually need these partnerships for one simple reason. The more people you bring to the table, the more people that know about you, and the more other people start talking for you. So communications is not one way, and nor should it just be me shouting. It is actually more effective when someone else talks about me and recommends me to someone else than it is about me approaching in the first place myself. So knowing that, this is the moment we step into market. And quite often, people associate communications with this point. They associate marketing with the very things that they actually see. But in actual fact, all of that early work has happened before something actually sees the light of day. It's actually been built and designed with people, gaining feedback at every point. Is the imagery right? Is the wording right? Is it actually getting across the message just as you meant it to be? And if you've ever spoken to someone in a second language, you understand, as someone else is learning, how difficult it can be to get the exact meaning across. So for us, the engagement phase is all about how well what we've actually put into market is getting out there. If it's through social media, how well is it actually hitting people's feeds? And once it's hit feeds and someone's actually been exposed to it, are they actually doing anything as a result? So measuring our performance, understanding exactly where we're at, is what it's actually all about. And this is where we actually designed this process as a wheel, because it's never ending. So in marketing, our job was to listen, learn, and then act. and then go through it all over again. Because if you're complacent and you sit still, the first thing that happens in commercial practice is your competition follows, copies, and moves. So if you're not constantly ever changing and monitoring and moving, well, then you actually get left behind in the race that is market share and profit. So that understanding has to come into the work that we actually do. Now, I'm just going to step you through one application of this process to just demonstrate to you how this is actually used to build a communication campaign. So if we go backwards, understand what's been run in the past, we call these systematic literature reviews, we can actually see what's happened before us. We can work with experts, the people who know best. I'm a marketer. I am not an environmental scientist, a health practitioner, or any other form of person who actually knows best. So my job is to learn through them. What's worked before? What hasn't? Because these two things alone allow us to stand on the shoulder of giants. We need to know already what's being used that's working well. But to actually break a pattern and create a new normal, we have to do something differently. And this is imperative. It's really important. We can't just copy what's been done before us. What are we going to do that's different to start to move the needle in the direction that we want? So in this case study, I'll step you through and show you just how we do that. So now that we've looked backwards, understand what people were already doing using our not only literature reviews and our expert interviews, but surveys, we actually take a step forward. Let's now work with the people that we're trying to reach. And here in this particular instance, we use co-design and work with 42 members of community. We did this to understand what a program for them would look like. Now, this project was all set in the context of helping Australian charities. Can we attract donations and can we increase the quality of goods donated? Because too many Australians dump goods onto charities, and that essentially was what led to the funding to deliver this particular project. Now, before we enter market, and again, if you remember, I said we have to figure out through social media what's going to hit the mark fastest. What we actually did was popped up 6 alternatives and let the algorithms tell us where we should go next. So which lady attracts attention the most? Which one starts to spark action? And so you can see through the current, as I just show you some of the program components, the very first one reached the fastest with the least expenditure. So important for us. That's how we were getting people's attention. So we'd applied the co-creation process to understand what a program should look like for people. From that, we developed a communications program. We did at the time also have a second pilot program running to test whether doing more than just communicating would change an outcome. So what did our program look like? It's an integrated campaign, consistent look and feel applied across a variety of different mediums. And take a note how few words are actually sitting there and how much we're trying to cut straight to the chase. That call to action. So if you look at the postcards down the bottom, you can actually see a donation map for the actual suburb that we were working in at the time, demonstrating exactly where people could go with their donations and sending a message to that community. If it's good enough for a friend, it's good enough for us. So a way of communicating quality and actually taking a positive stance, which is what the co-design sessions had called for, to work with community to help them, show them where to go to donate. Because ironically, they weren't really sure in the first place. So we ran it through a website, in-store demonstrations and display units, which you can actually see, and we generally promoted the quality of goods. So what does a quality good look like? And you can see in the top corner, the actual shopping centre display. 2 different bag types were distributed out to community members. And on the bag were statements about the goods themselves. So teaching people what a good quality good looks like and other goods can actually look like. So giving them 2 levels, what I would have called in my old marketing days, A grade and B grade stock. So we promoted across a variety of channels, cinema, shopping centres, direct mail, social media, and also through the press, attracting attention, getting onto Channel 7's state news. So when you have a great story to tell, very easy to get other partners to start to share your story for you. And at any time you can actually pull in press, huge reach, other than what we could actually afford to actually get for the work that we actually did. Now, evaluating our performance is really key. What channels work for us? And so our communication campaign was running in Loganholme, and a pop-up shop was the additional thing happening in Cannon Hill, which is marked here in red. So you start to understand where and what is actually working for people. So the Bill Cash pop-up is unique and specific to Cannon Hill. So we got more awareness in that suburb where there was a little pop-up shop and something more exciting than just our advertisements. But we can't always do that. So communicating itself can often be enough. Now, we asked people what the messaging meant for them, and we got really positive responses back from people. So across those yellow, designed, girl, good for your friends, good for us, people started to understand many different things. Can you recycle your clothes? Don't dump them. So a very circular economy feel was actually coming through the work that we'd actually done. So that was just people doing unprompted response when we asked them, what do you remember about the campaign? And you can see here also our surveys getting run before and after the campaign to understand, did the campaign make a difference? So a really critical part in that whole process that we actually run. Let's build it with people, co-creating it, and then engage and measure our success for what we actually did.
Thank you, Sharon. And we're just going to launch a poll. If you paid attention to the CBE process. So what does CBE stands for? Well, we got a keen audience today. Might just end it here, and most of you got it right. It is co-create, build, and engage. So I'm going to take you through the next phase, which is enhancing effectiveness. So if Sharon gonna launch a new slide. Here we see the communication model. So it's a bit more advanced to what we usually know. The simple one is simply sender-receiver model. So this one, we have the noise, we got feedback, we have environmental factors, all which impacting our communication. So if we think about the past couple of months, or the past 2020, and the COVID situation and the whole communication around that, we've heard communication from so many different sources. So there's from government, and that's not just the local ones, but international, national, and state governments. NGOs have communicated with us, the media, influencers, and even individuals are communicating or making a statement. Then the platforms that these are communicating on include social media. So we have Facebook, Twitter, we have our more traditional media, newspapers, both hard copies and electronics. We have the TV, all our live streams, YouTube, and radio. And this is where it gets particularly noisy and quite messy. And this is where the feedback comes in, and we need to consider our message is received and whether it is the action we want our participants to take. So we just have Sharon to go back one slide again. And when we are communicating that we need to go and buy the essentials, and then toilet paper is what being stripped off the shelves. It's really just adding to the whole layer of complexity of where we are communicating. So this is where the environmental factors sits, and we need to consider the social and cultural norms. So social distancing, for instance, might be easier in some cultures. So I'm from Denmark, and when we're waiting for the bus, we do practice social distancing. Whereas in other countries, wearing a mask is some sort of a norm. So all of these we need to consider. So for our communication to reach purposely, we need to account for the factors and reach our target audience. Because the more we know, the better we can tailor our messages to create the action required. So now I'll have Sharon to change the slide, and I'm going to throw you into the deep end here. So have a read of this communication piece. And then I want you to find 2 imaginary highlights, 1 green and 1 yellow. So you're using the yellow whenever this particular organization speaks about themselves, and you're using the green in your head whenever the organization speaks directly to the target audience. So have a read and see where you would highlight green or yellow, and then cast your vote. I can see votes are coming in. Just going to give it a few more seconds. And let's end it here. So a bit of a split result. Most of you think that the most should be highlighted in yellow. And that is absolutely right. So the majority of this text is where this organization speaks directly about themselves and not to the target audience. So I would highlight all of this in yellow. So essentially this means that they are overlooking the consumer or their target audience. It's a very simple test. So I'll run it once more with another example. And the deal here is the same. So have a read and highlight in your head what should be yellow and what should be green. And you're just going to have a few more seconds. And you're on to it. So I'm just going to end the poll here. And the majority of you think that there are less yellow in this particular example. And I would say it is spot on. So Spotify here are talking much more directly to the target audience. And as a consumer, that is way more appealing than an organization that talks only about themselves and more to themselves. So then we got readability, and that is another way to test your written communication and potentially enhance it. So readability assessments are used a lot in health communication, and this is because the target audience here are very diverse. So when you're doing readability, you should look at it in light of the relation to the formal years of education the receiver must have attained to understand the material. So one readability measure is the Smok Index. And here the grade 9 has been recommended as the best practice. And grade 9 equals an education relating to 14 or 15 years of age in Australia. So once more, I'm going to throw you into the deep end. So here's another example of this communication piece. Have a read and then try and rate the readability using another poll. So how easy is this text to understand? And try your best to rate it. So 9 is the recommended reading level. Awesome. A few more seconds because I can see the votes are still coming in. Okay, let's end it here. So most of you agree that it is definitely over. How much over? There is a bit of inconsistency, but it is well and truly over. So this particular piece scores almost grade 20, which requires the receiver of this message to have attained at least a university degree. So this particular piece uses a lot of 3-syllable words and long sentences, and all of these are impacting the readability. So we've done some readability work in the environmental space, and we assessed communication materials from 4 different stakeholders, all with the common aim of changing farming practices in the sugarcane industry. So as you can see, all of them scored higher than the recommended reading level. And here it is the farmers, the sugarcane farmers, who are the target audience. And usually they don't have a long educational background. Therefore, hitting the target becomes even more important. So we worked with one of these stakeholders to improve their readability. So we took one of their newsletters and we had a real hard go at it to see if we could improve the newsletter. And we had a bit of a play around with the layout as well. So as you can see, the one on the left is the original one, and the one on the right is what we then played around with. So we managed to reduce the score down to a grade 10. It's not quite 9, so you can see we still have a bit of work to do, but it's definitely improved. So to continue in the sugarcane industry for a bit longer, we have pulled together a report, and we did 2 versions of the same report. So we have the full report with all the details that went to the client, and then we did a summary report for the growers. So if this was you, which report would you prefer to read? So Sharon's going to launch another poll, and we'll see what your preference is. There's an agreement across the whole line here, except for 2 people. I'm happy to send these people my report for a review the next time. So the full report was available for the farmers as well, should they be interested in learning more. All they had to do was reach out, and then we would send them the reports. So before I hand back over to Sharon, I just want to emphasize the key is your target audience. So the more you know about them, the better you can tailor your communication efforts and the better the outcomes. So make your writing interesting. You can use bullet points, infographics, or something that breaks up the pages. That is really useful. Use active voice and minimize the long sentences. We are really good at using long sentences with massive words when we're writing, especially when we're writing academically. So these are just a few pointers where readability and communication can be improved. I'll hand back over to Sharon now, and she'll talk about how you can fine-tune your communication strategies.
Interesting, isn't it, to see how few of us really do want all of that detail, and how if you can give it to us faster and easier, we are really appreciative of it. So as a marketer, I've never assumed that people actually want to take notice and dig in, and I've never assumed that giving them a whole heap of information and facts and figures and reasons why is how I'm actually going to get them to act. So coming up with compelling offerings, actually tapping into people's motivations, and really taking an approach and a stance that's like, what's in it for me, is really key in actually designing communications that attract attention and engage people. And without any attention or any engagement, taking enough notice to now start to take the message in, you will not see action. So it's really critical to cut to the chase. Don't be tempted to give everyone everything. They didn't want it in the first place. Spend the time learning. what is it that people actually need? And from that knowledge and armed with it, work with them. Are they now understanding what you've designed in the way that you meant? Because we do all take away different meanings. And then how well is that particular piece getting people to act? The more you can get it out there, the more people can take notice, the more action that you will start to actually see. So let's take a look at the back end of checking our communications and doing the work we need to do to understand where to next. Because just designing it isn't enough. Putting it out there is good. And today with social media, we can certainly track a lot. And when we put up A/B testing formats, like I showed you before, it's very easy to learn quickly before you actually commit to rolling out the full campaign. So a great way to save precious dollars and get more bang for your buck. So recall, we had 3 stages of work that we do. The learning phase is co-creation. Let's build the things that people want to see in the first place. So let's work with them, get them to design with us, take away the key insights. And that's not the easiest thing to do, because how do you distill from the many ideas down to the ones that you know will actually work? You have to take all of the training and the learnings of insight and take it into program build. So what does a coordinated campaign look like? How much lead time do you need? And are you using the channels that people actually want to see? And the more you can step away from people's self-reporting, the better your own performance will actually be. So what drives me as a practitioner? It is how much reach I'm getting, but importantly, beyond the reach, how much conversion is kicking in, and then are people coming back over time? That's my true measure of success as a marketer. So it's not the one-off engagements where I get my best outcomes from. It's actually from the people who come and show up time and again and are happy to continue with you on whatever journey it is that you've both set to go forward. So I'm going to ask you to actually watch a couple of advertisements, and then I'm going to talk you through some of the rationales and what we were up to next. So let's start with the first one. I want you, after you've watched it, to answer a poll for me. Ooh, hang on, technical issue.
Today, our paid charity staff and volunteers had to throw out 1/3 of the items that were donated. These went to landfill. One item was the old shirt that you donated last week. Before donating, put your goods to the test.
Karina will put up a poll and I want you to answer for me. How did it make you feel? I just picked up that the poll's got a repeat too. I checked it this morning, but not well enough to pick that one up. Have to love detail, and devil is in the detail. So let's end the poll, Karina, and share the results. Most of you actually indicated that this one's got a degree of negativity attached to it. Let's take a look. So we'll stop sharing this one and move to the next advertisement.
By sorting before donating, you can save charities time. This time can be spent delivering services for those in need. Before donating, put your goods to the test.
And once again, let's take a look, and this time I'm happy to say we have proper categories. Tell me, how did this one make you feel? It's really good to see that most of you are actually engaging across this process. It's great. Not always fun to actually get and see the answers coming in from a poll. So when Karina shares the results with you, I want you to take a look. Look at the differences across the different people who are sitting in this webinar today. Note, it doesn't hit the mark with everybody. What we have here is a case where more people are feeling mostly positive as a result of this particular execution. So I'm going to ask you now to go to the chat box for me. I want you in the chat box to actually share why you think the second ad makes you feel more positive or makes most people feel more positive. What is it that makes that ad more positive than the first execution? Absolutely fantastic to see the breadth of different answers that are actually sitting there. The music, the tone that it takes, the images that we've used. So baby clothes obviously give us a bit of a warm for most of us. I think some might look at it in a different light. Uplifting sort of feeling. It feels less preachy. It's a far more positive stance and gives people more time to engage with the messaging to then actually think they actually want to take action. So whilst the words and some of what it was asking were fairly similar across the two executions, the positive execution here really makes us feel differently. But since we've actually run this test here in this room, we've also been out there in the social media world. And what was really interesting to learn for our team was how much the algorithms start to actually move and change what people then get exposed to. So you are very right. Those that actually picked up that the negative one does make some people feel really bad, does indeed actually do exactly that. So when we pitched this into the online environment to watch what happened next, what we ended up with was a lot of commentary, debate, and high levels of engagement from community. But we also saw a lot of people still clicking through, more so in response to that ad than the positive one. So because of the way algorithms are structured, we started to see a story whereby the negative one was getting more traction in the Facebook environment, despite the fact that the positive one, when we actually test it this way, makes us feel better. So you really do need to actually understand your mediums, what's going to happen as a result of what you actually put out there. Huge learning for our team, really important way to actually understand what goes on. So what we do across these executions is take a look to understand how people are reacting and what they're actually seeing. We want to know whether we're creating a mostly positive or a mostly negative response. And what you can see here are average scores on 7-point items with people either highly agreeing, so once they're hitting the 5.4, 5.5 levels, that is that most people strongly agree that this is making them feel mostly positive. So you can see different executions are capable of generating a very different response in the people who are reading the message. And this type of work is really needed to understand just how much your message is hitting the mark or is it completely missing the mark. And these are just some of the things that we use to assess our own performance across the measures we've actually designed. Now, some years ago, we were actually involved in evaluations for the Australian Department of Health. These evaluations were looking at voluntary labelling on products. We wanted to understand with the wider group how things were actually performing. Now I'm going to actually get you to watch eye tracking. This is a heat map, and forgive me now if something goes wrong because I had a warning saying my internet's being unstable. So just yell if it starts to become problematic and I'll get my videos off. I'm going to ask you to watch the heat map. The more red something is, the more it's captured people's attention. So you're going to see two, and then I'll talk to you about what you've actually seen. So you will watch where people's eyes go first. You will live through the experiment with the group of people that took this experiment, and you're going to see over time where eyes go and who looks at what the most. So I ask you now to watch the heat map. Okay. And in the true style of experiments, as we do to assess performance, to see what's going to work, in other words, optimise, how are we going to get a better outcome? I'm now going to show you a second heat map and ask you to, again, watch. So this project, our job was to actually assess consumer awareness of the pregnant warning label. So what we did following the survey was actually run an experiment with eye tracking to start to diagnostically understand some of the larger study results that we'd actually seen. So I want you to tell me what's the difference between the two ads in the experiment. What can you see? Go to the comment box and put your answers in there, please. Just in case you need a quick preview. This is ad experiment arm 1, ad experiment number 2. What is the difference between the two? If you take a look at the pregnant warning label, you can see the lady standing there with her drink in her arm. Did you know where to look, what to see, what you're actually looking for? When you go back to the heat maps and watch the performance of what people go on to see and what they do, you end up with a finishing heat map on the red one, demonstrating that the warning label that is 50% larger and actually struck out in red attracts more attention than the first eye tracking experiment demonstrated. So when I go back, and I'll just return to the previous slide, because sometimes it's just easier to see it, to remember. Take a look here at how there's a bit less attention to what was the in-market label. So this label features grey, 50% smaller, and a woman standing there again with a glass of wine in her hand. Now, the national survey that was run to assess the effectiveness of what at the time was voluntary labels indicated that less than 5% of Australians were aware of what that label was doing, even what it was saying. They couldn't recall it. They didn't know it existed. And through the theory and the world of marketing that we know, we knew that this warning label was potentially placed in the wrong spot. So if I asked you a few questions now, where would you have put it? Having watched those heat maps and where people's eyes went to, what they saw and what they looked at, how can you increase the performance of a warning label to say pregnant women shouldn't drink? Tell me what you think. Top. Here comes the first answer. Fantastic, Emily. Put it at the top near the picture. Why? Because that's where our eyes went first. It was the first thing we looked at. And one of the limitations of this particular experiment that Kwong and I ran was that perhaps we forced people to look longer than they ordinarily would. On top of that, they were just looking at a label. So this doesn't look like your standard bottle of wine like it would in a shop where it can't even get our attention in the first place. So if you're serious about getting people to act or to understand that drinking when pregnant is harmful, well then that label needs to be front and centre and at the first line of sight, not hidden in the back corner, which at the time with the self-industry regulation was actually occurring. So today, some years later, the movement has actually happened such that this year it was mandated that all alcoholic beverages must have labels on them. So that's progress. But is it enough? Is that label featured strong enough and front and centre so that it actually gets women and also the families around them to support them to not drink? So I think these are things for all of us that we must take careful attention of to actually help get the message across. I'll briefly hand across now to some of the team just to talk about some of the other things coming up.
Thank you, Sharon. So in this session, we've spoken a lot about communication. You may have noticed this year something happened which meant many of us had to spend much of our time working, studying, and living at home. As a consequence, we have had to adapt and change much of the way we do things to an online format. Communication in the digital world is more important now than ever, and Karina actually mentioned in this session the key is knowing your audience. So developing strategies to understand them online is imperative. We're currently offering 40% off for our upcoming content marketing masterclass, which helps you create content that resonates with people. Our facilitators have worked and conducted research in digital marketing for many years and will walk you through applying concepts to your business or situation. Please keep in mind this offer expires on Monday next week. I'll give you a moment to take a photo of the screen now so you remember the discount code while I share the link in the chat. Fantastic. Sharon, am I sending back to you? Or shall I continue?
No, you sure can. So in social marketing at Griffith, we've been running behaviour change programs, and many of these include really strong communication elements because people need to know about us in order to sign up for our programs, get involved and come along. So communication is a huge part of what we actually do. And Karina and I have brought this webinar together for you just to give you some of what we actually know. So more detailed training is available and Alex has just stepped you through that. But another really big part of social marketing at Griffith and what we actually do is to help raise and train and bring about better behavioural change. So can we help equip people with some of the training that we've had so that you can take it back to work and apply it to your own practice? So other things that are actually available are other free webinars. So if you're not aware or you haven't actually looked at what else is actually on offer, some of the series have been running right across 2020. Some are actually available on our YouTube channel and you can sign up and just watch things in your own time. But there's also future events coming across the rest of 2020 and shortly you will see the 21 calendar starting to breathe to life. So from time to time, if you feel like stretching your wings, feel free. A big part of 2020 was that COVID did shut us down. And previously we used to run an in-person conference change. This year we took that online and it is freely available. So in grey are previous change webinars that have already been run and more are upcoming. So if you're interested in behaviour change, whether it be changing the environment, changing people's health or helping protect people, there are a heap of people that we've come across where we celebrate their work. We've brought them together to come to you and you're very welcome and we invite you to join us or to watch the webinars at your own space and time. And then finally, this year we were super lucky. FutureLearn actually opened up and made a course that we'd previously built for them, openly accessible and freely available. So if you want to learn more about the approach, start to unpack and get a little bit more of the detail around the Co-Create, Build, Engage framework, CBE, this course is something you can take in your own time and space and actually use it to actually train yourself up a little bit more. And of course, our team are always here to help. We're really committed to seeing what we can actually do. But in the true style of how we love to run, Karina and I now would love to open up the floor. And first, I'll thank everyone who's been here attending today. For those of you that have no questions, please feel free to leave now. And for anyone who wishes to actually just take a moment and have a bit of a chat for us, Karina and I are here with any questions. And if we can't answer it, we'll figure out someone who actually can. So feel free to throw some questions our way. We've been really, really happy to have you here today. So thanks for coming along. And for all of the people popping a message into the chat channel, thank you too.